Some memories never fade, and for me, 9/11 is one of those. I was living in the Throgs Neck section of the Bronx at the time, and I could see the Twin Towers out my back window. It was a part of my everyday view, something I will admit I took for granted. But on the morning of September 11, 2001, that view changed, and it changed forever. 24 years later, this is my story of 9/11. Of September 11th, 2001, I did what I did every morning. I was running my own company, a company called All Tech Creative Design. And I shared an office with a company called Atlantic Coverage Corporation. My two partners were the owners of Atlantic Coverage, Anthony Pano and Lou Spina. That morning, like every morning, I was the first one in the office. At 7 a.m., I walked in, stopped at the cafeteria, grabbed my breakfast, headed up to our office, and sat down at my desk, started eating my breakfast, booting up my computer, all the normal stuff. At around 7:30, Anthony came in. Around 7:40, 7:45, Lou came in, and the rest of their office staff came in. I was the only employee of Alltech. We were a web design, network installation, and general computer service company. One of the women that worked at Atlantic Coverage sat way up in the front and always had her little radio on. And she was always tuned into the New York news station, 1010 Wins. Around 8:55 a.m., I heard her gasp and say, "Oh my God, a plane has apparently crashed into the World Trade Center." Now, my thoughts, and I think everybody else's thoughts in the office, was it was just a passenger plane and these things happen. We'd all heard of planes crashing into the Empire State Building. I don't think prior to that date I'd heard of a plane hitting the Twin Towers, but it wasn't something that was out of the norm in my mind. I then decided to turn on my radio. I had a little radio on my desk also, and I started listening to 1010 Wins at about 9 a.m. And the reporters were now saying that it was a commercial jetliner that had hit the Twin Towers. I was a little bit taken aback. My heart kind of sank because I was thinking of, my God, I can't imagine how many people were on that thing and the amount of damage it must have done to the building. At around 9:05, the news came through that made my heart sink completely. A second commercial airliner had crashed into the World Trade Center.
People in the building?
Oh, another one just hit. Something else just hit. A very large plane just flew directly over my building, and there's been another collision. Can you... Forgive
my language. Anthony Pano, the gentleman that was one of my partners, his office was kind of right next to me. And I heard a hand hit a desk rather loudly and scream, "Mother." That was just around the time when we all kind of started to figure this was no accident. We were under attack. There was kind of a bit of chaos going on in the office. Most of the female employees were crying. I believe Lou Spina was crying as well. I was going into emergency mode. I picked up my phone and started dialing my home number. Now, my home at the time was, if you went by how the crow flies, right straight across the East River, my home was maybe 5 miles from the World Trade Center. When I dialed the phone, all I could get on both the office phone and my cell phone, which was, the time, it was 2001, it was kind of a brick, was that there was no service available in New York, on Long Island, in a pretty busy commercial area of Long Island, Syosset, New York. I kept dialing. I pretty much, a lot of you may remember the old thing that we used to do to try and win a contest on a radio station. Just keep hitting redial and keep dialing. That's pretty much what I did. And I kept getting the same message. And I couldn't get on the internet on my computer because that was unavailable. So I was pretty much cut off from the outside world. I went downstairs and went outside to have a cigarette. And there were quite a number of other people out there doing the same thing. And I saw one of the most startling things that I think I'd see during the entire time that this was going on. Just inside the door where I used to step out to have my cigarette, the smoking area out there was a branch office of the FBI. It wasn't some major branch, it was some little clerical branch office. And they removed the identifying placard that was outside their office, so no one would know what was in there. When I stepped outside, it was approximately 9:30 a.m. I finished my cigarette. It doesn't take me long to do. Went back inside, went back up to the office. At around 9:40, 1010 Winds was stating that a third plane had crashed into the Pentagon. I had no idea what was going on. Nobody did. We couldn't even go to the internet to try and find more information. All we had was 1010 Winds. And I mean, what was next? Were we going to start getting hit by missiles? Were we going to... we were at war from all looks of it. And then at around 10 a.m., I heard the most chilling and somewhat terrifying broadcast go over the open air on 1010 Winds. A reporter, unedited, uncensored, shouted on air, "Holy shit, the whole goddamn tower is coming down." And that was when the South Tower of the World Trade Center completely collapsed. By 10:30, when the North Tower came down, we were numb. We had no idea what was going on, what we were going to do, and if we were next. Who knew? We had no idea. Were we actually going to have ground forces? Literally no idea. At 10:45, the news came through that a jumbo jet had gone down in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. And there's actually been a movie made about them where the gentleman on board yelled, "Let's roll." And they retook the plane, but couldn't stop it from crashing. I went through numb. I went through the other side of numb. And I was crying. I openly admit I was crying my eyes out. But I was also enraged and frustrated. I couldn't get to my family. I couldn't hear my family. I couldn't see my family, nothing. I'm not going to go through every minute of that day. To say the least, it is probably the most horrific day of my entire life. But we did get a notification that all traffic in and out of New York City was shut down. Anthony Pano and myself were the only two that needed to go through New York City in order to get home. Anthony lived in New Jersey, which would have required him going over the George Washington Bridge, and I lived in the Bronx, which would have required me going over the Throgs Neck Bridge. And neither one of us could do that. We ended up having to sleep the night in the offices of Atlantic Coverage Corporation. Everybody else was able to go home because they lived on Long Island. And throughout the entire night, neither one of us could get in touch with our families. He couldn't call his wife and check on his baby. I couldn't call mine or check on my stepdaughters. I did hear on the news that all of the schools had closed and the children had been sent home. And then the next morning, Anthony and I'll say woke up, but neither one of us really slept, got the news that they were reopening the entryways into New York City. We couldn't get in our cars fast enough. When I got to the Throgs Neck Bridge, there's a big loop that goes up onto the bridge from the Cross Island Parkway. I was going up that loop as I'd done every day under normal circumstances. And when I got to the top, I stopped my car dead, right in the middle of the right lane of the Throgs Neck Bridge, because right there across the East River was the smoke cloud rising from where the Twin Towers had once stood. It probably took me a good 30 seconds to realize that I wasn't the only one stopped. There were probably 12, 15 cars lined up in the right-hand lane of the Throgs Neck Bridge at a dead stop. Some with their hazard lights on, some not. I didn't have mine on. A few of them had gotten out of their cars and were just staring. I stayed in the car. I had my window down, and I was staring. And that was the first time that I smelled it. I don't know if any of you have ever had a electrical appliance burn out on you. There is a particular smell that comes from those electronics burning. And that was the smell that permeated the air so completely that you couldn't smell anything else. I eventually started driving my car again after probably about 5 minutes sitting there. And I'm fortunate that I didn't really get up to any kind of speed because I couldn't stop from just turning and looking until I couldn't see it anymore on the other side of the bridge. When I got home, my wife and my stepdaughters were fine. They hugged me. They were overjoyed to see me. They had no idea that I was coming home because they couldn't get in touch with me and I couldn't get in touch with them. And then I went out and sat on the front steps of the apartment that we lived. And I just thought about it. And I saw a lot of other people doing the same thing. And that scent, that smell was thick. That would stick around for probably 2 weeks. And I saw all of the things that other people talked about seeing. I had one guy drive past my house who had one of those big, really, really loud, and most of us consider annoying, stereos in his car, playing Whitney Houston's version of the Star Spangled Banner. People were talking out in the street. People were kind of coming together. And, you know, it's funny because I kind of yearn for that today without the tragedy. In the days that went after that, we came to find out what everybody here already knows. It was an attack by Al-Qaeda and apparently an attack by Osama bin Laden. And it was only those 4 planes and nothing else happened afterwards. I came to find out that one of the top clients of Atlantic Coverage Corporation was being hailed as a hero. It's funny because if you looked at the guy, you would have never thought hero. Not a very big man at all, maybe 5'8", maybe. Fairly young at the time, bald, but I think bald on purpose. He shaved his head. But he was on, I believe it was the 50th or 51st floor of the World Trade Center, below where the crashes had happened. And he led his entire office out of the World Trade Center, down the stairs, with the first person behind him holding onto his belt. And basically a daisy chain behind him, and he led them out. I also came to find out that a volunteer fireman that lived maybe 3 doors down from me was killed in the World Trade Center. I didn't know him personally. I didn't know him very closely. I did know him to say hi. And in the months that followed, Atlantic Coverage Corporation, which is a surety bond company, which the definition of a surety bond is on the screen, started suffering pretty bad financial problems, as did apparently quite a number of other surety companies and insurance companies and construction companies. And they decided that they needed to divest themselves of all of their outside investments, one of which was my company. So my company went out of business, in a way, because of 9/11. September 11th will always be a date etched in my memory. The day the skyline that I knew changed forever. I can still remember looking out that back window when I got home, seeing nothing but smoke where 2 shining towers used to stand, and trying to process what had happened. That day changed me. That day changed New York. That day, in some ways, changed the world, and it brought us all together. This was my story of 9/11.